amazing that was that you just in 30 minutes came up with something. Of course, it was not super beautiful, but I could have bought quite a lot of products from you guys because I could access that online and reach out to you. That was amazing. But if we want to get a little bit bigger, then we, of course, need to go through the build, measure, learn loop again and go through it one by one. A small recap. Of course, our goal is and will always be to test ideas as quickly as possible, to fail as quickly as possible. This is a little bit unnecessary, the next couple slides, so let's jump on the measure part. We already went through the initial build part. So measuring, I quickly want to talk a little bit about metrics. So of course, in the early stages, it's good enough if people tell you what they consider valuable, what they think they want, but at some point you want to get to something that looks a little bit like this. So you want to get to a kind of KPI system. This in depth in this growth, this is true for a subscription-based SaaS company, and you only want to do that if you're in the acceleration stage. Nonetheless, there are things that are super important. So at the end, the only thing to take away from this is once you start measuring, you need to be aware of your goal. Profitability is the goal of small businesses and businesses that are not trying to go through the roof. So businesses that are not startups need profitability. Profitability is rather easy to calculate. You take your revenue, you deduct your expenses, and you know your profits, right? If you're a startup, your goal is not profitability, your goal is growth. Growth is a little bit a different beast. Basically, the calculation is how many new customers do you get minus how many customers churned or went away from you. But before you have any measure, that should be the first consideration that you have. And for you, as building prototypes, as building products for an insanely small company, insanely small, you're probably all startups because you want to, in the first step, want to go at least big enough so you can support yourself. And with just 2 customers using a 10 euro a month subscription, that's just not sustainable. No matter how profitable you make it, you need to grow a little bit. And those are probably the most important metrics that you have. So use either of them to measure what you want to measure, to embed that in your prototypes at some point when you do them higher fidelity, to look at signups, users, active users, churn, average session lengths, bounce, and NPS. Why did I put that here? Exactly, because we learn now. What does that mean? Again, if you want to look at in detail, you can look that online, you can look that on the slides, but what does it mean? For example, when the signups are high, it could mean that you're going somewhere towards a product market fit, more and more people coming to you, and you have a great marketing or you have external effects. That is something a lot of startups, including my startup, gets wrong. When you have good press, you have a lot of sign-up, you have huge sign-up, but it's just an external shock. Press sign-ups will go exactly to 0 right after the hype is gone. Low could mean that your value proposition is bad, that your product is bad, but it also could mean that you're just bad in communicating. This happens sometimes to companies that are founded by a lot of tech-savvy people. They are insanely good at creating tech, but not so good in communicating their value. So take away, just because your metric is bad does not necessarily mean that your product is bad, but also could be external effects. Other side around, if your metrics are good, it could be that your product is good, but also consider the possibility that there's some kind of external effect that you might not be aware of. Users is one step deeper, which is fantastic. So if you have a lot of users, you probably are solving a problem for them. You're probably close to scaling. In particular, if they are unpaid users, you're close to scaling. But it also could mean that you're just too cheap. That is one consideration that, of course, you want to have at some point for the profitability. Too low users could mean that you're not really solving a problem, but it also could mean that you're solving a real problem, but you are just too expensive and new users don't want to come. Active users means users that actually do something on your website. Usually you define a time span once a month, once a week, so users that come back once a month for at least 5 minutes to do something. High active users are better than signups, are better than users, because they show you that you are really building something that is fantastic. If you want to monetize on active users, you could consider a subscription. If I'm coming back every month, then you're giving me value every month. If I'm not coming back every month, it could either mean that your product does not really give me value, but it also could mean that it gives me great value, but just at one point. So maybe a transaction is the better model for that. Examples for where it gives me great satisfaction once is probably if you're buying a physical device. So once I have it, I don't need to come back to your store. So I don't need a subscription to that. Churn rate. If you're not aware of churn rate, then definitely read up on this. In particular, if you want to build product at some point, churn rate is the #1 killer, metrics-wise, market-wise for startups. Churn rate basically means how many customers that you already have are leaving your sales funnel after you converted them to paying customers. The huge problem is if your churn rate is too high, then it costs you so much money to just get new customers on board. Existing customers, of course, are the most valuable source for creating further traction. So do everything to keep your customers. So a high churn rate is basically always problematic. High churn rate meaning a lot of people leaving again. It's always problematic. Your subscription is definitely not feasible. You definitely need to work on your business model, and maybe you're also targeting the wrong audience. If it's low, if your churn rate is low, it's almost always a very, very good sign. Average session duration, also very easy. So people are going on your website and are leaving after 5 minutes. So then you have an average session duration of 5 minutes. If it's high, then you have probably a pleasurable user experience. But it could also mean that people are not finding what they're using for, because it's just so complicated to go through your website. They need really to do it. For example, if you want to hide the unsubscribe button, you have a fantastic long average session length, and you can sell, well, our customers are super engaged. No, they just want to unsubscribe, but you made it so hard for them. So think about, again, both sides. A low average session rate, of course, is the opposite. And bounce rate, now the last thing is or the second last thing. Bounce rate basically means how many people go on your website and directly leave again. Bounce is super important for SEO and referral marketing. So if you're searching something on Google and you go on a website and see it's not what I wanted and go back from it again, you bounced. So you looked at it and it's not mine, you go back. Google will notify that. Google will remember that and say, okay, apparently this website is not relevant. So bounce is super important if you have a good bounce rate, if you can communicate clearly, if your website loads quickly, and if you have a clear target group, and if you just be very generic in what you're advertising, and a lot of the people bounce, then a lot of people will be unpleasant, and the social media apparatuses and the search engines will not help you rank high. And finally, the Net Promoter Score. There are different opinions. If some people like it, some people hate it. I'm somewhere in the middle. The great thing about the Net Promoter Score, you can read it up on the internet, how it looks. I also got them in the slides, which I will share with you afterwards. It's basically a metric from 100 to -100, and the idea is you take all people who love, for example, the seminar. You are the guys who love the seminar. You gave me a 9 and a 10 that you like it. You are the guys who also loved the seminar but gave me a 1 to 5 that you probably didn't like it. And I take you, the fraction of you minus the fraction of you, and have then a score. If the score is higher than 0, the theory behind that is you go to your friends and say, this was fantastic, and tell your friends you also have to come. So bigger than 0 means you will bring another friend and we will grow organically, versus you will go home and say, this was really a waste of time, nobody should really go. So you will not come and your friends also will not come. So lower than 0 means your customer are so dissatisfied that they will leave away and tell their friends to leave away. And what you are looking for, particularly in the early stages, is something higher than 60 or 0.6. So the customers that you have are super happy with what you have. And as you can see, or maybe yesterday saw with the exit questionnaire, it's basically 2 slides, which I would recommend actually everybody of you to do for every of your product. The one is asking for the Net Promoter Score on a scale from 0 to 10. How likely are you to recommend this to a friend? And the second one, open feedback. What would you like us to improve? So you have both. You have the quantitative number, and you have the quantitative number and the qualitative feedback where you can get better. Once you've learned that, the next thing is again to go back to build. Now you know what is the problem, what is the improvement thing. So let's build something that you should build, that you want to build. And you basically have always three opportunities. You can add features, you can remove features, or you can exchange features. And please consider what you want to do. Most of us are usually always here and try just to add features to the product, and at some point it will work. While at some cases it just can be that the better solution would be just take a feature away, focus on the other features, or this feature is just confusing people or is attracting another target audience which should not be attracted because they are not happy, they only have one feature. So remove that feature, or exchanging features. And this is another point why I think prototyping and low-code is so fantastic, because replacing a feature in low-code is piece of cake. You saw that I've built something in Zapier. Jana basically did the same thing in real time in Make with a little bit of added features. So it's basically very, very immediate to do. There are pros and cons to everything. Think what to build. And where to build it, again, with the framework in mind. We have front end, we have back end, we have database. So no matter what feature you're building, it should go somewhere. It can make it more beautiful, it can make it more efficient, it can make life for you easier. That's also true if you want to create new matrices. So if you have a customer database of your users, then at some point maybe you want to add a field called satisfaction or feedback or whatever you call it. So you have also some back-end functionality that helps you making your product better. And with that, why am I telling you this? Because the core of the section is user stories. Who of you works with user stories or knows how to work with user stories? Perfect, I expected nothing less. Perfect, well, fantastic. So for the rest of you, user stories are a very nice way of describing a feature, request, something that you want to build in a very easy, very transparent way. It's basically going back to the problem space, where we have the customer, the obstacle, the goal, and the boundary. We want to write now things that, from the user perspective, we want to have in our product without describing the technical solution. So we want to understand the problem. We want to write the problems that the customer has and rank those problems so we can work with them. So we start with, as a customer, when I am facing an obstacle, I want to reach a goal so I can do something with that. And I've already showed you how this looks operationally. It basically looks in any kind of system. You can do that wherever. I will also give you a template on how to do this very simple in Notion, where I just write all the tickets. I, as a owner of the ticketing system, so I as myself, when I am being asked repetitive questions, I want an AI to auto-respond so I can reduce my workload. That is really everything that is. The exercise that we are now skipping is to write user stories that help your store to grow. However, the only way to get better with user stories is to try them out, to use them, to test them. And this is something I would recommend for everybody of you who has not been familiar with user stories to do that. Because this is describing the problem. Don't describe when you want to improve, when you want to manage your prototypes. Don't try to force the features in there. Try to describe the problems that we're having, so you, when you build the solution, can work from the problem and work from there on. Here again, you want to probably use in the components that the thing touches. So are you working on the logic? Are you working on the data? Are you working on the interface? And when you're working with user stories, you put them on a Kanban board, have your things on the backlog. So all the features that eventually you want to build for your store, a checkout button, an ability to shop more than one thing, to change colors of the Birkenstocks from yesterday, for example, or the Panda, then it's all in the backlog. And at any point in time, you choose exactly one user story that you work on. And only this one is the thing that moves through there. And this is the only thing that gets to done. And only when you're at done, you can choose the next item. How to choose what to use when? Super simple framework. Also not the only framework, but one that I think is easy to get started with. Think about the user stories. Think about the obstacles. How unknown versus known and critical versus non-critical they are. If you want to test with a user story that is completely unknown and that's super critical for your operations, this is something you should do directly. This is something that's super prioritized. If it's critical and known, then it should be very soon to do. So this should also be in your closed backlog, in your to-dos. If it's, on the other hand, unknown and non-critical, you can squeeze in at some point when you have time. And of course, if it's known and not critical, then just don't do it. For example, if you want to change your logo, changing a logo never probably, on most cases, I can only imagine very few cases where this actually matters to the value proposition. It's super non-critical, and it's probably known that it's not impacting your prototype. Then don't do a new logo. If it's super non-critical and unknown, for example, adding different colors. You don't know if it changes a lot of things, but the value proposition of your store is not providing shoes in every color, but it's providing shoes in every size or something like that. So you can do it at some point when you think, okay, now we have the time, but it's not as important as the two above. So this brings us back to the ticketing system. Again, I will share a template with you exactly how you do this. So you have the backlog, the to-do, the testing, the done, and the publish. This is the big thing, how you want to manage when you grow, when you are working on it with more than one team. And the thing you work with it is you have the thing in progress is exactly one per contributor. So if you're a team of the 4 of you, then only 4 things can be in to do, and every one of you can do exactly one. It goes into testing. That is a step that you want to have rather early than late, because you will lie to yourself and say, okay, this is already done, and try to push it to done. The better practice is that somebody is owning the user story, and the person who is owning the user story should not be the person who is trying to solve that user story. For example, you say, I want to have different colors, and you build the different color feature. So you're only allowed to put it in testing, and so you go back and try out the feature and say, is it good enough for me, or is it not good enough for me? Does it solve the problem? If it's not good enough for him, then you have to go back and you have to do it again with the feedback that you get. And only when the owner, the product owner, says, okay, this is now through testing, we can get it to done. And at some point, you will do deployments where done and published is a different thing. So this is something you will learn rather early when you're building a product, not a prototype anymore, that you have two different systems. The one is the production system and the one is the development system, and you just push features on the development system, and once this is stable or once this is a round package, then you put it to publish. For everything we did yesterday, for everything we're doing today, done and publish is very much the same thing. Exactly, and it walks through that. We can work with sprints. The best practice for you as very early entrepreneurs is a 2-week sprint. Don't make everything too complicated. You can add a column to do, and to do is only the items, the user stories that you think you as a team can conduct in 2 weeks' time. The things in the backlog will not be done during those 2 weeks. And if something is not completed within the sprint in to-do, it goes back to the backlog. And while you're planning the next sprint, which you usually do on the first day of the sprint in the morning, then it comes back to to-do. And the last thing I want to share with you is the estimates. It's a little bit hard to read. What I'm pointing at is estimate. So when you're saying you two have now a startup and working together, you are doing a 2-week sprint, then you only have an estimate of so much time, of so much capacity. And this estimate is something that you want to put in. So when you're planning on what you want to do the next sprint, the next 2 weeks, you can say, okay, for example, the estimate could be the working hours. You estimate the time to take. So you have both 40 hours in a week. So you have 2 weeks, which is 80 hours. You're 2 people, so you have 160 hours. You should only work at 80% capacity because of unplanned work. So we're at about 138 hours. So no, I did that wrong, but very close to that. So we try to add up our user stories to this number. Using hours usually is not the best way because you can't always estimate how long it will take, but a lot of teams try to put it by complexity. So other things you could use would be Fibonacci numbers. You know Fibonacci, which is 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. So you always add the last two numbers together with complexity and say you only have so much complexity to solve in 2 weeks. Or you could also use prime numbers. Some use those. Or you could also say some metric that you find for yourself. So how many coffees does it require to finish that user story? The only important thing is at some point you, of course, need to align on what these numbers mean. We, for example, in our organization, in our startup, used Fibonacci numbers, and Vicky, who was our CTO, had to remember the entire team, maybe the entire team, but at least me, every single time, that it's not hours that we are putting in here, but it's complexity in Fibonacci numbers. So how complex do I think a single task is? And once you have that, you are probably good to go. Again, a very, very short overview, but please take away to manage your thing in user stories. I will also give you a little overview on how this looks in reality before we've done with this session. Please bear with me for a small second. Then I show you how it works on my system. Okay. So this is how I manage my stories, my tasks. As you can see here, I'm using one database for all the user stories that I have. So these are the different services that I'm running. Can you read it, or it's a little bit hard, right? So in the top line, there are different views for this Notion database in this. For example, the co-founder matchmaking, we looked at the logic of the co-founder matchmaking as well. The office hours, which are something that is not online yet. Courses, which is exactly this. The community, which I'm building out. A co-founder Copilot, which is an AI product I'm doing. A feedback form that I'm having, and a mentoring that I'm doing. So for each of them, you can see I have user stories. Those user stories have a title and a user stories. For example, in the matchmaking, I would like to have a monthly recap. As a subscriber to the founder matchmaking, I'd like to get a regular recap in a quiet hour, so I can review all recent ideas in peace and quiet. It's probably not a very good written user story, but I think it brings across what I'm wanting to do. So it's in the area of the logic with medium priority. So when I get to it, I probably start with the highest 2 priorities here and then work my way down to the medium priorities and think, okay, how would I do that? It will probably use a mailing service so the people can do that. Maybe I can also do it with software, I have no idea. So it does not, as you can see, it does not outline any of the technical solutions that I'm having. It's just outlining, okay, this is something that people told me they want. Or let's look on the other hand in courses, what I've seen that you wanted. A course website, for example. This was a very highly asked for thing in the last course. As a participant, as you, I'd like to find all the contents on the course on a simple to use website. This was a high priority. This is already done, as you can see. It's a little bit more complex because another team is working with that as well. And here you can see all the things, everything basically that is here on green, on done, are things that I implemented from last December till last month. Because you gave me the feedback. So the feedback, which I again will ask in a second, is really helpful for me to see, first of all, if a lot of you give the feedback, I know it's a critical feedback, and I can do and implement those courses, those user stories. Again, also with this, let's stay with the website. As a participant, I would like to find all the contents of the course on a simple to use website. Also doesn't show the technical implementation. We had quite some considerations if we would use it with software, if we would use Webflow, if we would use a learning management system. And in the end, we decided for a number of reasons to go with software, at least for the beginning, because I think it's the easiest to maintain as well. Another thing, of course, that you have in building bigger organization is a principle called you build it, you run it. So when you build a service, you also have to be able to run the service. And if I use a very complicated website to use, then for me to use, then you won't have any good time with it either, because the entire content will be outdated. This is it very quickly on management of tasks, on management of prototypes. Are there any questions to that? Yes?
Do you use, so I see that you use Notion a lot, and I was doing that, but I think at that phase when I was trying to be very lean.
Yeah.
And immediately the moment when I tried to add someone to the team, then they pitched me a pro subscription for €8. So
Yeah.
what were you saying?
Yeah, so the question is my take on Notion as a documenting tool. We had some discussions on Notions. I think the camera lost me again. We had some discussions on Notions also yesterday regarding using Notion as a database. Notion is a very versatile tool, but I get your frustration as soon as you create bigger teams. It gets quite expensive. You can work around a little bit by adding guests to your private workspace, of course. However, that also doesn't solve the entire problem. If you grow your organization, you will definitely need a paid tool the one way or the other. I'm using for the services I'm building in my mandate of the Term Venture Labs, all on Notion. The tools I built, for example, for Eisbrunn, I built on Trello. I'm frustrated with both tools, so I could not recommend you one over the other. One thing that seems to work quite well for developers is Linear. which is quite nice to use if you're a more technical person. It's a little bit hard to get in with less technical people. But again, this is the big crux, the big conundrum on us small organizations at the moment, or the startup organizations. You will have to work or try your work around with tools that, of course, want to make money out of you at one point. So yeah, Notion is probably one of the better tools to start with, even if you have to invite them to your private account. More questions? Yes?
Maybe it's a slightly different question, but which tool would you include in your website if you want to gather some data from actual customers? Like you're doing a new startup and you have a website and you want to, like, not signing up them, but like, yeah, I'm selling something, have you interest, but not a form, you really need data from them.
Yeah.
To push it afterwards in the Notion or Airtable or whatever. So what tool would you
Yeah.
use?
The question is, what kind of form tool would I use on our website to get user sign up or interest data? The answer is for that, it really does not matter. So I can show you in a second. There's a way to build front ends with Notion that look quite well. The app that does that is called Supersite. With Supersite, for example, you can implement Tally quite easily, and it looks almost native. It completely breaks. As you can see, my entire screen is on dark mode. Tally is always on light mode, so the entire website will be dark mode, and the form will be light mode, which looks not too good. If you're using something like Software is more a web app. It's not a landing page, but it has an integrated form builder. And when you're just building a landing page, and I think one of the easiest way to building landing pages might still be WordPress and Webflow, and those come with built-in tools or plugins that are very close to the core that allow you to build simple forms on the website directly. Question?
So you talked about some metrics that we need to track. Can we also automate calculation of those metrics using code or low-code tools?
Yes. The question is, how can we automate the calculation of the metrics? And yes, that's definitely something I would go for a number of reasons. Once you scale, the biggest advantage of automatically getting the metrics is that you can unbias a lot of those. So as soon as people calculate that, then they move around some context windows or time windows and polish the numbers a little bit, which really does not help you if you want to make good decisions on that. And you can do that. You can actually do that quite easily. There are tools to help you calculate those numbers. But of course, again, you can, for example, put those numbers into Airtable, for example, metrics that come through queries or not queries, sorry, surveys. So when I ask you for the NPS, you can calculate that in Airtable. You can also directly calculate this in Tally. You can also calculate this directly in Typeform and get that sent out. For the more usage-based metrics, the easiest way is to implement Google Analytics on your website. To implement Google Analytics, you know, it's also a super easy thing. For the people who are not aware, you go to ads.google.com, sign up with your account there, open a new website, you get a very small code, it's probably some 20 digits long. You put it either on the website builder, very prominently, they all have a feature where you can put this, or you put it in the header of your website yourself, and then it basically tracks all those usages from it calculates the bounce rate, it calculates the session length, it calculates the users and where those users come from. The bigger problem with Google Analytics is it gives you so many metrics that you need to focus on which are the ones that are interesting, which ones are the ones that are important. But I think with those two general tools, tricks, you should be fine. Google Analytics plus hand calculated of survey data. One more thing to add is then you might consider putting in something like Hotjar or some advanced analytics, which in prototyping, or where we are right now, where we are trying to find what sticks and what not, is very irrelevant. Hotjar is a tool which can tell you when people are on your website, where is the cursor, for how long. It gives you basically a heat map when you go on the website, where is the attention of the people. That is very cool when you are at the stage where you try to optimize your website for absolute perfection, but not for the stage when you just try to get the first customer to be on the website and try to interact with the website. So when you don't have a user experience team, you probably don't need those advanced analytics tools. Rather focus on the things that matter, which is usage, which are sign-ups, which are churn, and move to those. Because when you do have the startup, between Series A and Series B, so between two rather early funding rounds, so between maybe let's say 2 and 4 years into the startup, you will need to move from, I have something that a lot of people find cool in the pyramid from the lower sides, a lot of people told me that is cool, to something that you can calculate, that you can measure. And you'd rather start with that a little bit early and see you're moving in the completely wrong direction, to have the time to readjust and to move somewhere where the numbers match up. Because on the Series B, every investor wants to see your metrics. No investor is interested anymore in your vision, in how much fun you're having as a team, or in anecdotes that your first unpaid pilot customers told you. Cool. Then guess what comes next? Yeah, you guessed right. Please, again, some feedback. After the feedback, we will do a short coffee break for 15 minutes. And after that, we will look into front end, into software, which will still be cool. Software is, I think, a fantastic tool that